You're listening to the Touchdown Under podcast with Jack, Emilian, Anthony, and Ruth. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Touchdown Under podcast. This is episode 10. I'm Jack, your host, and as always, I'm joined by Emilian.
Hey, how's it going?
Anthony.
Good to be here.
And Ruth.
Happy to be back.
Now, for the third week in a row, we are not in the same room, and we've had to overcome some technical difficulties today to bring this podcast to you, but we promise we'll try our best. On today's podcast, we have got our quarterback, running back, wide receiver trios. We have ranked our top 15 in the league, and we'll be discussing and debating our choices. If you would like to follow along with us, we posted our quarterback, running back, wide receiver trios on our Instagram page. That is at touch.down.under. So that's where you can follow along with us while we go through our official list. But before all that, we'll kick it off with our news segment. And making news this week in the NFL was that Washington have announced an official temporary team name after they concluded their internal review of the team's name and logo last week. They will be called the Washington Football Team until a permanent name is decided in the near future. Emilian, what do you think about the team name?
It's a perfect name to have as a placeholder. I think that, it's necessary. You can't just call them the Washington blank. So, Washington Football Team. I quite like the name. And, we saw that they're going to have, instead of the logo on the helmets, they're going to have the numbers instead. Interesting to see how that'll look.
Yep. I think it'll look all right. There will officially be no preseason games in 2020 after the NFL proposed to the NFL Players Association that there should be no preseason games this year amid the COVID-19 pandemic. Arif, what are your thoughts on no preseason games this season?
I think health-wise, it's a good move for the organization, but at the same time, it is unfortunate for those undrafted players this season. They won't have much of an opportunity to show what they have. They'll only be able to try and carve out or try and make their team roster probably through their own training camps, and we probably won't see any of those Raheem Mostert type players that we've seen emerge in the preseason in the past.
That's a good point you make there. It will be a little bit more difficult for undrafted free agents and other fringe players to make an impact. In other news, the NFL has been working with Oakley to design a helmet shield that would cover a player's entire face mask, and every team, quote, will have them on hand for players to test when they report to camp. Also, the expectation is apparently that they won't be required as the NFL grapples with COVID-19 protocols. Anthony, what do you think about this?
For me, I'm not sure why the NFL would not make that mandatory. Why would they, punish Oakley to make something, for the player's safety and then have it optional? And realistically, I don't think it would interfere with how players, would typically wear their helmets, of course. So I reckon most players would opt not to wear them, which, given the current situation with COVID-19, is not a good idea at all. I should make this mandatory, in my opinion.
No, I completely agree with your point there, Anthony. The fact that they're not mandatory just speaks to the NFL's unpreparedness in relation to this crisis. They haven't, announced a proper protocol for player safety just yet. And the fact that these aren't going to be made mandatory, and you're right, some players just won't want to wear them. And I think that, doesn't bode well for the league or for its players' safety. Now, finally, fans will have to wear masks at games in stadiums where fans are allowed this season. Now, obviously, it's still unclear which stadiums will allow fans and which won't, and obviously the capacity that will be allowed. There are a lot of unknowns, but obviously this seems pretty straightforward, doesn't it, Emilian?
Yeah, exactly. And you see in MetLife Stadium, the Jets and Giants, they've announced that, fans will not be allowed to be in attendance. I think that's also just as good as having fans, with masks. I'm not sure how many fans will abide by those rules, but we'll see.
Well, obviously, you'd hope that if fans show up without masks, they'll be just kicked out of the stadium because, you can't be risking this kind of stuff, especially, so close to the players. Now, that wraps up our news segment, and now we can get straight into our quarterback, running back, wide receiver trio list. And at number 15, to kick it off, we have Cam Newton, Sony Michel, and Julian Edelman of the Patriots. At number 15, I think chemistry is the main question mark here, particularly between Newton and Edelman. Obviously, a lack of preseason might, deter, them building chemistry, but hopefully if they can build chemistry, and I think they probably will be able to eventually, I think this trio will become pretty lethal this season.
It is going to be very interesting to see how Cam Newton builds that connection with both Sony Michel and Julian Edelman, but as you said, Jack, particularly the one with Edelman. I mean, with Brady on the center, this trio was very strong and reliable, even if that offense wasn't great last year. You know that those three players were definitely the cornerstones of that team on the offensive side. But yeah, I think, as you said, the main question mark between chemistry is why we've got them at the bottom here.
Yeah, I think this is no doubt unknown trio simply because Edelman and Michel have certainly been proven to be great players playing alongside Brady over the last decade and over the last couple of seasons for Michel. I feel like Cam Newton, if he was able to finish his stint in Carolina being healthy, as opposed to leaving after playing a season on the sidelines injured, this wouldn't be such a mystery. Like we would know where he'd stand in terms of him being his production, him being as good a player he was back in 2016. But I think with Bill Belichick being in that system, he'll be able to mold Cam Newton the way he wants, and I don't think it'll be that much of an issue. But I think given that there's massive unknown quarterback, we have to put him at 15 on our list.
Yeah, I'm a bit skeptical about a possible connection being built between Newton and Edelman. I guess we'll have to wait and see how that goes. However, there's no doubt that this trio is probably in the top half of this, in the NFL, especially with Sony Michel's mix of speed and power complementing that pass game. I have a question for you, Emilian. Do you think the Steelers are unlucky to miss out on this list?
I wouldn't say unlucky. I think that they've got a good trio, but the fact that we haven't seen it at its potential that it can be. I mean, Roethlisberger's coming back from a pretty severe injury. Juju Smith-Schuster hasn't really had the opportunity to be a really good number one receiver yet. James Conner didn't replicate his 2018 season. I think the Lions, however, are definitely unlucky to miss out because they've got some great players at the three positions here. You got Matt Stafford at quarterback, you got Kerryon Johnson at running back, and you got one of the best receivers in the league in Kenny Golladay. I think they're unlucky to miss out on this list.
Yeah, I think the Steelers would be the most unlucky, if anything, but I do believe we chose correctly in putting the Patriots here. The thing with the Lions is obviously they've got, I like Stafford. Obviously, I like Golladay. Kerryon Johnson he was a little bit injured, but he frankly didn't show a lot last season, and I think he's what kind of let that trio down. But yeah, I think your point, Arif, about being unsure about chemistry. I think obviously now there's going to be a massive emphasis on building chemistry during training camp because that's really all these players have until the regular season to kind of build chemistry and get themselves primed for the season. At number 14, we have Josh Allen, Devin Singletary, and Stephon Diggs from the Bills. This is a pretty decent trio. However, Josh Allen is what is holding this back without a doubt, in my opinion. I simply don't believe in him as a true franchise quarterback. I believe he'll eventually be found out, similar to a guy like Mitch Trubisky. I just don't see enough from him to be able to say that, he can take this roster, which is becoming elite, to, a Super Bowl. Singletary, I think, has massive potential, and I foresee a definite sophomore leap for him this year. And obviously, we know how good Diggs is. Great addition. Those two guys are kind of what makes this trio a little bit better than what I think it actually is. Emilian, what do you think?
Yeah, I think potential is a key word with this trio. I think all three of these players are good. I mean, I know you don't like Josh Allen much, but I definitely am a believer in him. I think that he is going to be the Bills' franchise QB for many years to come if he can fix his accuracy issues, which I believe he can. I said Devin Singletary, massive potential. I agree with you. I think a sophomore leap is in store for him this year. And I think a change of scenery will do him good. He wasn't happy with how much of the ball he was getting in Minnesota. I think that Josh Allen will target him a lot this season, especially deep downfield. He's going to want to capitalize on that arm strength and, the accuracy issues. If he can get those fixed, this trio is going to be absolutely deadly.
Yeah, I think compared to the rest of the trios on this list, this trio from Buffalo is very young. Diggs has the most experience, having played 5 seasons in the league, followed by Allen with 2 and Singletary with just the 1. I think that's the reason why it sits at 14. These players, except Diggs to a certain extent, haven't reached their full potential yet. They're still young. Singletary missed 4 games in his rookie season, still recording 775 rushing yards, so he definitely has a lot of upside coming into his second year. Allen is also nearing his prime, if not, or have already reached that. And I think with Diggs coming to the team, it only adds more talent that Allen can throw to. And so that he might be able to take that next step to securing that elusive playoff win they've been looking for at Buffalo for many years.
Yeah, this trio for me has the potential to, in a few years down the track, possibly be in the top 10, but they definitely have to play a bit more together for that to be established. If Allen can fix his accuracy issues, as you alluded to before, Emilian, he has a very bright future. He has some traits that can't be taught and an absolute rocket of an arm, to be honest. If Devin Singletary played a full season, he would have easily passed 1,000 rushing yards. He has a lot of potential. And I think Stephon Diggs was too good to be a number 2 receiver in Minnesota, and a change of scenery was exactly what he needed.
Arif, I just had a question for you. You just said that Josh Allen has some traits that can't be taught. What are you referring to there?
I'm referring to his rushing ability. We saw him dive for a lot of first downs, and he seems kind of fearless in that respect, like almost completely like having no regard for his body. He's able to...
Is that a trait though?
I think that's a trait that not many quarterbacks have. I think a lot of quarterbacks these days are told to slide by all their coaches to avoid injury. But Josh Allen really fights for those extra yards when he's running.
At number 13, we have Deshaun Watson, David Johnson, and Will Fuller from the Texans. I think David Johnson fits in well in this offense. I've seen people, being skeptical and doubtful of, how he's going to fit in, but I do think he fits well because, as well as being a beast on the ground, he's also a passing threat out of the backfield, which is really helpful for a quarterback like Watson, who's usually scrambling under pressure, needs a bit of a bailout option sometimes. And I think that's kind of what he can provide, as well as being, that first, second down back. And I also truly believe Will Fuller takes a leap this season in the absence of DeAndre Hopkins. I believe he gets the lion's share of targets in that wide receiver core this season. Yeah, Emilian?
Yeah, I like what you said about David Johnson. I do think that he'll be good as a safety blanket for Deshaun Watson, whose offensive line often, crumbles like a few seconds after the snap. But I do want to mention that, the Texans haven't had a strong run game in the past few years, so I don't have big expectations for David Johnson. But I do want to say that, Deshaun Watson's running ability can make up for what David Johnson lacks in the run game. And the connection between Deshaun Watson and Will Fuller is incredible. And I think that, Will Fuller, I don't think will take a leap in terms of, his production. But I do think that if he stays healthy, you'll see one of the best receivers have an incredible season next year. So yeah, hopefully Will Fuller can stay healthy. If he can, this connection between Deshaun Watson and him will be incredible.
I mean, Deshaun Watson does such a brilliant job as a quarterback of the Texans, given all the issues at so many positions on the offense. The poor offensive line and the weak run game has led to Watson effectively carrying the team on his back. In relation to this trio, I think the raw skill each player has is enough to prove this as a very damaging trio. And if that offensive line can protect Watson adequately, it could be a much more dangerous trio than it already is. Like, I know we're analysing the players, by itself, but I think like this trio could be way more dangerous and further up on this list if they had more opportunities to create more plays.
In my opinion, Watson and Fuller have probably some of the best chemistry I've ever seen between a quarterback and a wide receiver in the league at the moment. But obviously, as you guys have mentioned, Fuller can't stay healthy, which is why they brought in someone like Brandon Cooks. Anthony, Do you think that Will Fuller will be able to be the Texans' true number one receiver, or do you think Brandon Cooks will step up and be that guy for them?
I feel like Brandon Cooks will be able to step up and be that guy for them, just because I'm skeptical of Will Fuller's ability to stay healthy. I feel like there's a good chance that Brandon Cooks gets his chance to be that number one receiver just because Will Fuller, he's out of the team for an extended period of time.
I don't actually agree with that, just because Brandon Cooks throughout his career has never been like a possession kind of guy. Like he doesn't get a whole lot of receptions. Most of his yards come from long completions down the field. I really just don't buy into that. He is what I would consider, like a second option to Will Fuller. Will Fuller gets injured, but I don't think he's, like incredibly injury prone. I feel like he just needs a little bit of luck. I feel like if he stays healthy, he would definitely improve his production, and he would definitely be a number one receiver, at least in terms of targets. And I think Cooks would be the number 2 option there. At number 12, we have Phillip Rivers, Marlon Mack, and T.Y. Hilton from the Colts. And the addition of Phillip Rivers makes this extremely underrated trio even better. Marlon Mack was an 1,000-yard rusher last season, which people just don't seem to remember. I mean, obviously they drafted Jonathan Taylor, but I don't think I still think Marlon Mack is the number 1 guy there in the backfield in Indianapolis. And last season, I think he deserves another opportunity, especially after last season. He had a really good year, and I think this share should be higher on our list for sure. Emilian?
I think the word to describe this trio is solid. I mean, we know how good each of these players are. Phillip Rivers is going to benefit from that strong Colts offensive line, and as I said in the AFC South episode, he also has one of the best receivers in the league right now in T.Y. Hilton. I think that's going to do wonders for him. We saw how well he could, throw the ball when targeting Keenan Allen. So I don't see why T.Y. Hilton would be any different. You add Marlon Mack to that equation. He's been constantly improving since he entered the league 3 years ago. He's been getting more and more carries. So it'll be interesting to see, how that goes this season now that Jonathan Taylor's in that position as well. I think the Colts are a very strong team, and a big part of that is because of this trio.
I think if the Texans had a better offensive line like the Colts do, I would swap this trio with the Texans in our rankings. Either way, this trio is highly talented as it blends 2 proven, highly skilled veterans in Rivers and Hilton with Marlon Mack, who is close to, if not has already reached his prime. The 2 strong points in this trio would certainly be in Rivers and Hilton, and I'd expect the pair, who have combined for 12 Pro Bowl selections over their careers, to build nicely together in Indianapolis for sure.
This is definitely an interesting trio. With the new look, young offensive line, I think Rivers will have a lot more time to throw than he did in Los Angeles. And, T.Y. Hilton is one of the most underrated wide receivers going around. I mean, he is 30 years old now, but his whole career, really, he hasn't gotten the notice. Maybe possibly due to his size, I'm not sure, but he's definitely going to be a presence. And as the season goes on, I'll be curious to see how the Colts share snaps between Marlon Mack and Jonathan Taylor, because just looking at Jonathan Taylor's college tape, it's just going to be hard to keep a guy like that off the field with the upside he could bring to the Indianapolis Colts.
I disagree, Arif. I think it's hard to keep a talent like Marlon Mack off the field when he just had an 1,000-yard rushing season last season. I don't think a rookie's just going to come in and, just take over for a guy that just had 1,000 yards. In fact, I don't know that we see him in many games at all next season, Jonathan Taylor. I think if we see a down year from Mack, he might get a chance next season. But this season, I don't see a lot from, perspective-wise from a guy like Taylor this season. At number 11, we have Tom Brady, Ronald Jones, and Mike Evans from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. There's definitely a question mark, I think, over the chemistry between Brady and Evans. Obviously, I think, Brady's, just such an accomplished player in this league. I think he'll get it. I think he'll be able to build chemistry. I'm not worried about that. But until I actually see it, that's one little question mark I have over this trio. I also need to see more out of Ronald Jones in order for me to even consider elevating this trio into the top 10. Last season, Jones had 724 yards rushing on 4.2 yards per carry, which is decent for a young guy who's playing in a pass-heavy offense. But I'm definitely expecting a leap from him this year, especially if this trio is to be rated higher next season. Arif, what do you think?
I mean, we know what we're gonna get from Brady. He's not gonna put up the kind of flashy numbers that he did in New England, I guess. And it's entirely possible that his numbers regress even further from 2019. But I believe he's in Tampa for one reason, and he's there to take the Bucs to the playoffs. I think Ronald Jones is a talented back. I still think that he's running out of chances to become a starter in the NFL. I feel like if he doesn't show up in training camp, especially with, the fact that there's not going to be a preseason, he could easily lose his job to someone like rookie Keyshawn Vaughn. I believe Mike Evans is a really talented receiver, but, we haven't really seen, well, obviously we haven't seen Brady throw to him or Chris Godwin, but once we have, it's entirely possible that this trio will be top 10 material.
Yeah, I'm not sure I agree with your point about, Brady not putting up flashy numbers, or if I think that, he didn't put up flashy numbers last year because he didn't have anyone really to throw the ball to. He only had Julian Edelman, who's not really, a flashy player. He's more of that, possession, first down kind of guy. Here, he's got Gronkowski, who's been his favorite target, for the past decade. He's got Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. I think, he's got all the right pieces to give him, huge numbers. And I think that, the reason it's out of the top 10 here is because that, you've got Mike Evans, one of the best receivers in the league, but we just haven't seen Brady throw to him yet. And also the fact that, he hasn't been able to train with him, until recently. So having Gronk there, I think that Brady's going to rely more on him than Mike Evans. And as you said, Jack, with Ronald Jones, he hasn't proven that he can be a great running back. So that's why this trio misses out on the top 10.
Hey, I have a question to you guys. Do you reckon, I'm not sure about this, but do you reckon this trio could see something similar to like what Baker Mayfield experienced in the Browns, given all the questions surrounding Tom Brady and his receivers?
I see what you mean. I do see a lot of similarities between the Bucs this offseason and the Browns last offseason, because it's mainly all hype, there's no actual substance to it. But the difference is that Brady is a proven incredible player. He's the greatest quarterback of all. He's the greatest player of all time. Whereas Baker Mayfield was entering his second season, and there's a lot more ego to the Browns compared to the Bucs right now. I think that the Bucs are definitely one of the best teams, coming into this season, unlike the Browns were last year.
Yeah, I agree. Obviously, there's a lot of hype surrounding the Buccaneers, and we haven't seen it on the field play out yet. But Brady is just worlds better than Mayfield is and likely ever will be. And so that's why I don't think this is a comparable scenario. Arif, I disagree with your point about Tom Brady. You said we know what we can expect from Tom Brady. I don't think we know what we can expect, because last season is not what we expected from Brady. He had a down year as, compared to his previous season. And there's a good point Emilian made about the guys he had around him. I feel like with a better supporting cast, we might see a, better production this season compared to last season from Brady. So, yeah, I just disagree about that point about knowing what we can expect from him, because it really is a bit of an unknown. And I just back to your point about Keyshawn Vaughn, I don't think he's just going to come in and upstage Ronald Jones. I think Jones did okay last season considering the limited opportunities he had, considering how pass-heavy that Buccaneers offense is. So I feel like Jones definitely will get another shot this season to prove what he's got. Otherwise, then we can start talking about him getting replaced by a guy like Vaughn in the backfield. At number 10, we have Kyler Murray, Kenyon Drake, and DeAndre Hopkins from the Arizona Cardinals. And this trio obviously has the potential to be incredible this season. There's an emphasis on this season, though, in my opinion, because I feel like there's a decent chance that Kenyon Drake leaves in free agency as a result of not signing a long-term deal last week. And so I think if this season is, a big year for this specific trio. Again, there are slight question marks about Murray and Hopkins and their chemistry, but I'm banking on them settling in together nicely, and a guy like Larry Fitzgerald to help a mentor or at least kind of partner well with DeAndre Hopkins in that wide receiver core. Emilian?
Yeah, I personally love this trio a lot. I think that Kyler Murray is going to have an incredible sophomore season. A lot of people are kind of overlook him. Like, he's quite short, yeah, but he's got a cannon of an arm. And I think he can really use that with Hopkins now on his team. Kenyon Drake has been explosive since he was traded to the Cardinals mid-season last year. He had 8 touchdowns in 8 games and 643 yards. Towards the end of the season last year, the Cardinals offense really showed how dangerous they can be. And I think that the addition of Hopkins alone makes this such a dangerous trio.
Yeah, it's hard to say for me that the Cardinals won't improve after acquiring Hopkins. It's exactly what a player like Kyler Murray, with his level, his level of talent, needs to up his game and take it to the next level. For me, I'm really excited to see the matchup between Hopkins and cornerbacks like Jalen Ramsey, Richard Sherman, Quinton Dunbar. Additionally, Kenyon Drake, is amazing since coming across from Miami. He averaged 80 yards. He joined in week 9 of the NFL season with the Cardinals. So I think the acquisitions that the Cardinals have made, in just the last 8 months have really boosted. This period, was completely different 8 months ago, and now it's shaped up to be one of the better ones in the league.
Yeah, it is quite an interesting trio and definitely packed with talent. I think once these guys play together, they have the potential to move up even higher on this list. But as you were talking about before, Anthony, with the Texans offensive line, I think the Cardinals O-line really must improve for this trio to be able to perform to the high level that I guess they're expected to. I guess, even if they have an average O-line, anything will be better than their O-line last season, which sacked Murray quite a few times. It will allow him to throw to Hopkins and give Drake enough space to speed off down the field.
I agree. On to number 9 now, and we have Baker Mayfield and Nick Chubb and Odell Beckham Jr. from the Cleveland Browns. Chubb and Beckham are obviously bona fide studs in this league. The question with this trio is whether or not Mayfield can step it up this season after a down campaign last year. If Baker can really bounce back, I think this trio becomes that much better. But I'm not, entirely convinced that Mayfield can overcome his, pretty poor season last year. And I'm concerned that if he doesn't, this might be, maybe even his last season in Cleveland. Arif?
That's a pretty big call, but I agree with you, Jack. I think the Browns will really be hoping that they haven't drafted the wrong QB, yet again. It's been a recurring theme for them pretty much the past 20 years, drafting, a quarterback high in the draft and them not performing to the level they're expected to. I think Baker Mayfield's really running out of excuses now. He literally has all the weapons he could possibly ask for. He has Odell Beckham Jr., Jarvis Landry, and out of the backfield, he has Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt even to pass to, and now it's just up to him to perform to the level that's expected of a first overall pick.
Yeah, this trio's ranking is almost solely based on whether or not Baker Mayfield can step up and play to a level similar to what he did in 2018. So Nick Chubb is proven top 3 running back in my opinion, and so is Odell amongst wide receivers. So I'm going to deviate for a second. I know we're supposed to be talking about just the players, within this trio, but I'd like to say that if Odell Beckham wasn't on the Browns all of a sudden and this trio included Jarvis Landry, I'd still expect a lot out of those players, to make the playoffs and really push the Ravens to win division, to push the Browns, to win a division. So the point I'm making regarding this is that, the team has everything it could possibly need. It has depth. It has skill at so many positions that the only thing that's needed here for the Browns to make the playoffs is just Baker Mayfield to step it up. And if he was to step it up and become a better player like he was back in 2018, this trio would be higher up on the list. I think there's a question mark surrounding whether or not he can do that, which is why we have it at 9.
This trio has 2 of the best players in the league at their respective positions in Odell Beckham and Nick Chubb. I think they've played together enough for us to see how dangerous they can be. Regarding Mayfield, as you guys mentioned, it's a make or break year for him. He has everything he needs to succeed, and I guess we'll see how it goes this season.
On to number 8 now, and we have Matt Ryan, Todd Gurley, and Julio Jones from the Atlanta Falcons. And I absolutely love this trio on paper. Ryan and Jones have admirable chemistry together, and Gurley on paper is an outstanding off-season acquisition. Obviously, though, Gurley has his health concerns, and that's what's ultimately holding this trio back. However, I'm expecting a sneaky good season from Gurley with a change of scenery, because I think a change of scenery is what he really needs to kind of, rejuvenate his career. Anthony?
It's a shame that Gurley had all those complications with his knee, because I completely agree with you, like saying that, if he was able to stay healthy and was, on the Falcons list back in 2018, this would undoubtedly be the best trio on the list. But having given that, Julio Jones has just been unbelievable over his career. He's been so consistent at such a high level of production, which is truly rare and is a centerpiece, this trio for me. Matt Ryan certainly thrives of having Julio as a receiver on offense, and is probably one of the best quarterback to wide receiver duos in the league.
If this, as you said, Anthony, if this was 2017 or 18, this would be the best trio in the league, in my opinion. But Todd Gurley's knee is just too much of a concern for me at this point to rank this trio any higher. He practically halved his production last year from his incredible 2018 season, and we don't know if he'll ever get back to that form again. Julio Jones is definitely the best receiver in the league, in my opinion, and he instantly boosts the strength of this division. And Matt Ryan has been playing well in the years after his 2016 MVP season. Still a top 10 QB in my opinion, and I'm excited to see what he can do, with Todd Gurley at running back this season.
Even though Todd Gurley had that, recurring knee injury, I still couldn't believe my eyes that the Falcons got him on the deal they did. He signed for 1 year, $5.5 million. I still think that's extremely cheap for a guy that comes with an injury ? Considering the level of production he had before that knee injury, he was in the MVP conversation. So I feel like if he puts that knee injury behind him, this will be a top 5 trio by the end of the season for sure. As you mentioned, Julio Jones is one of the best, if not the best receiver in the NFL. And although Matt Ryan isn't considered to be in that top level of quarterbacks anymore, he's certainly able to find Julio Jones and is by no means a poor quarterback.
I agree, Riff. I feel like this trio definitely has potential to move into the top 5. On to number 7 now, and we have Kirk Cousins, Dalvin Cook, and Adam Thielen from the Minnesota Vikings. Dalvin Cook and Adam Thielen are, really nice offensive pieces for the Vikings, and I feel like they'd thrive even more with an, really elite quarterback alongside them. And, while Cousins is by no stretch elite, he's more than serviceable in my opinion, and he finally proved that against the Saints in the playoffs last season. And so I'm really interested to see how far this trade goes this season, especially with all the changes with this team. Emilian?
Yeah, I really like the word used there to describe Kirk Cousins. I'd say serviceable is, the perfect description of him. I do think the Vikings definitely overpaid him. But, Dalvin Cook and Adam Thielen, they're just such great players, and they definitely elevate this trio. Dalvin Cook being one of the best running backs in the league, he massively boosts the legitimacy of this group. And Adam Thielen, he didn't have a great season last year, but he was injured for 6 games. He still only got 418 receiving yards. But I think that if he stays healthy, with the addition of Diggs' departure, I think that he's going to be more productive now that there's a lot less drama on the team.
Yeah, injuries really hindered Adam Thielen's production in 2019. Like you mentioned, Emilian, he only had 418 yards, but he had only had 30 receptions for the year and was, he was injured for a decent stint of the season. So his numbers weren't actually, they weren't shocking by any means. And, we've seen in the past, Kirk Cousins' first year with the Vikings, Thielen recorded, 1,300 yards. And so, given Kirk Cousins had, 2 years with the Vikings, taken them to the playoffs, they beat the Saints last year, he's got that experience. I think there's no reason why Kirk can't, return to that level of production where he can, boost Adam Thielen's game to how it was in previous years. Also, additionally, Dalvin Cook is no doubt the heart and soul of the offense in Minnesota. He completes his trio. He's a top 5 running back for sure, in my opinion. And I believe without him, the Vikings are a significantly worse team and wouldn't have made the playoffs last year without him.
I agree, Anthony. I feel like Dalvin Cook really brings this trio together, especially with the run-first offense. Even with Diggs leaving for Buffalo, I think this trio is still up there talent-wise. Cousins has been steadily improving in each of his years at the Vikings. And Emilian, I also agree with your point about them overpaying him, but he's not like a free agent, bust by any means. I think they still got quite a bit out of him, and hopefully he'll continue to improve.
On to number 6, and we have Russell Wilson, Chris Carson, and Tyler Lockett from the Seahawks. And I must say, after initially being a tad skeptical about Carson, I've been proven wrong, and I'm now a massive believer in him. 2 consecutive 1,000-plus yard seasons, and he's still an underrated back in this league without a doubt. I think, he can still really build on that, and it would be nice to see him really be recognized as one of the top backs in this league. And obviously, we all know about Russell Wilson and Tyler Lockett's ability and chemistry together on the field. Arif?
In my opinion, Russell Wilson's the second best quarterback in the league, behind Mahomes and ahead of Lamar Jackson. He has the ability to carry his team, he has that clutch gene that we've talked about in previous episodes, something that, Lamar Jackson hasn't developed yet in his, young career to this point. Carson's an absolute wrecking ball in the backfield. He finished 4th in broken tackles in the league last season. He fell a few yards shy of 1,500 yards from scrimmage. And if he stays healthy, I know it's an unpopular opinion, but he could be a top 10 running back. I think he's extremely underrated. We all know Wilson and Lockett are one of the best quarterback-wide receiver duos in their own right, due to Wilson having the best quarterback rating in the league when throwing to Lockett.
For me, this is a trio of underrated players, in my opinion. I mean, Russell Wilson, he's finally getting the recognition he deserves. I think that anyone would be insane to say he's not a top 3 quarterback in the league. Chris Carson, he hasn't played a full season yet, but as you mentioned, Jack, he had back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons. He's constantly improving, and his biggest weakness, that is ball security, can easily be fixed. In regards to Tyler Lockett, I think that the connection with Russell Wilson, as you mentioned, Arif, is one of the best in the league. I personally think it's the best in the league. I mean, in 2018, Russell Wilson had a perfect passer rating when throwing to Lockett. He also hasn't thrown an interception while throwing to him, I believe, since 2018, I believe. I'm not sure about that. But having DK Metcalf line up on the other side of the field is just going to make it easier for Lockett to keep producing balls, and as defenders will really want to emphasize, the defense on DK Metcalf.
Yeah, I don't agree with you, Millen, that this is a trio of underrated players. I think I argue that Carson and Tyler Lockett, they probably are, but Russell Wilson is a proven top 3 quarterback for sure. He's won a Super Bowl. And considering he's had 8 seasons in the league, he's already reached his peak, and he's at the top of his game right now. As for Chris Carson, he's the feature running back for the Seahawks for sure, and I would definitely say that he is underrated. Simply considering he's young, he hasn't reached his peak yet, in my opinion, and all whilst putting up great numbers. As you mentioned, Jack, he's recorded back-to-back over 1,000 yards rushing 2018 and 2019, and I feel as if going forward, DK Metcalf will prove himself to be that number 1 option at wide receiver for Seattle. So if you were to make a trio for the Seahawks in the future, I think it'd be, DK Metcalf would be that wide receiver option. But at the moment, Tyler Lockett is still, Russ's go-to target. And that perfect pass rating that you mentioned in 2018, Emilian, speaks to how good that partnership between him and Russ really is. And with a lethal run game through Carson, this trio is definitely deserving of being 6, I reckon.
Anthony, I'm not entirely sure about DK Metcalf eventually becoming that number 1 receiver for Russell Wilson. I feel like by the time Tyler Lockett is done with Seattle, there's a possibility that duo between Wilson and Lockett will be going for many, many years to come. I don't think I mean, DK Metcalf's going to be an incredibly productive receiver for sure, but I don't think that they'll have that sort of chemistry that we've seen between Wilson and Baldwin in the past and now Wilson and Lockett. I think that there'll be some sort of different connection there.
In fairness to Anthony, I feel like he said that he would eventually be the number one option, which I agree with. I think in time, Metcalf will be the number one option in Seattle once Lockett is gone. Obviously, that isn't going to be for quite a while, admittedly. However, I feel like he will eventually overtake him as number one option. Maybe he won't have the same chemistry, but I feel like he will be eventually the number one option. Anthony, to your point about this not being an underrated trio, two of the players in this trio are very underrated, and the third one, while Wilson isn't underrated per se, among the top tier of quarterbacks, he is somewhat underrated because people are already rating someone like Lamar Jackson higher than him. And I mean, I'm taking Russell Wilson over Lamar Jackson 7 out of 7 days each week. So, yeah.
I agree with what you're saying, Jack, about him not being as recognized as one of those within those top quarterbacks as being one of the better quarterbacks. But I think for someone for an NFL fan that knows what they're talking about, they watched the games, been a fan for years. Having been to the Super Bowl and what he's done and the team he has at the moment, it's kind of hard to say that I don't know. I feel like he's proven everything he has to prove. You can't really. His ceiling isn't much higher at all because he's been in the league. He's a veteran. He's been in the league for so long. I just don't know. I don't know if you can say that he is like that underrated. Maybe a little bit underrated, but not not much underrated at all, in my opinion.
The point I was trying to make is he's not underrated. You're right, he's not. But among that top tier of quarterbacks, like you talk about guys like Aaron Rodgers, Mahomes, Jackson, Breeze, Wilson. Wilson is, you could say, underrated in that tier. Like people are already saying Lamar Jackson is better. I disagree with that. And while I agree with your point that Wilson, is at the peak of his powers, I feel like he's still a little bit. Yeah, he's just a little bit overlooked in terms of those top quarterbacks. Arif, do you have something to add?
I think it's preposterous, in my opinion, for a quarterback of Wilson's caliber. He still hasn't received an MVP vote in his career. You mentioned those quarterbacks in that top tier. I'm fairly sure that all of those quarterbacks have gotten at least one MVP vote, and most of them have actually won MVP, which is quite interesting to me that Wilson hasn't gotten one yet.
Now on to number 5. We have Dak Prescott, Ezekiel Elliott, and Amari Cooper from the Cowboys. Dak Prescott is a decent quarterback. He's not, even near worth what he's been asking for, but nonetheless, he's a decent quarterback. And coupled with Ezekiel Elliott and the reborn Amari Cooper, it's clear to see how this is an elite trio, in my opinion. Anthony?
For me, the talent in Ezekiel Elliott and Amari Cooper is certainly there. There's no doubt about that. And Dak has shown in previous seasons that he has what it takes in terms of talent to win a division and, take the Cowboys to the playoffs, as he did in 2016. Unfortunately, I think he's regressed in recent years, which is a shame considering if he was able to perform like he did in his peak, he would probably make this trio within the top 3 or within the top 4, in my opinion. I think he's a big mystery within this trio. I think the contract negotiations will probably disrupt the chemistry between receivers and just the general locker room vibe between the players, in my opinion.
Anthony, do you think Prescott has already reached his peak? Do you think he's never going to go back to his previous peak? Is that what you're saying?
I think to be fair, I'm not 100% sure. I think he does have what it takes to get back to that 2016 form. Just, I'm not sure if that's with the Cowboys. I think, he's been rumored but he might, eventually leave the Cowboys, for the contract negotiations. I think maybe another team he can reach that. But I don't think at the Cowboys he can reach that 2016, form that he was in.
For me, Ezekiel Elliott is the second best running back in the league, in my opinion. And Amari Cooper, when he was with the Raiders, he was a good receiver, but he was nowhere near, that elite level. Since he's joined the Cowboys, he's been one of the best receivers in the league. If Dak was a great quarterback, around the same level as Deshaun Watson or Carson Wentz, I think this would easily be a top 3 trio for me. Maybe even the best in the league. Unfortunately, Dak Prescott just holds this group back way too much to put it in the top 4.
I agree a million. I think if Dak was able to come up in big moments and carry the Cowboys to the playoffs, as he did in his rookie season, this would be a top 3 trio for me. As impressive as Prescott is at times, I'm not sure how much more help Jerry Jones will be able to give him before he can recreate that campaign, that 13-3 campaign. Obviously, I agree with Anthony's point about how, that it's a possibility that he will reach that 2016 level, but I'm not sure that it will be with the Cowboys. As you, Jack, have talked about, how can Prescott deny over $100 million in guaranteed money? I don't think Jerry Jones will, be willing to give him any more money than that, and I don't see how there'll be any way that Prescott will stay in Dallas for too much longer.
I really agree with your point. Both points you made there, Riff, obviously about the guaranteed money and turning down. I agree with that. I also agree with the fact that Jerry Jones really can't help him much more. He's got a premier offensive line. He's got a great running back, Amari Cooper. He's now got CeeDee Lamb. What more could he possibly need to start, performing properly and bring this Cowboys team back to the playoffs? Because if he doesn't do it this season, I don't know if he ever can. And I don't know if he's going to get this much help at another team. So I feel like this is really an important year for him.
That's literally 3 first-round picks there. I mean, Amari Cooper, they spent a first-round pick bringing him from the Raiders. Then they spent a really early first-round pick on Zeke Elliott, and then CeeDee Lamb this draft. So you're very right there, Jack.
At number 4, we have Lamar Jackson, Mark Ingram, and Marquise Brown from the Ravens. This trio is improving at an insanely rapid pace, and I really think it's unlucky not to be higher on our list. We know Jackson is already a star in this league, and I wholeheartedly believe Hollywood Brown is the next one poised to make another massive leap this season. He already had an impressive season last year, but I really think he may be able to make the leap to elite status next season. Emilian?
I think 4 is the perfect spot on this list for this trio. I mean, having the reigning MVP instantly makes it one of the best. And the addition of Mark Ingram does make it a formidable force in the run game. But for me, I can't put it any higher than 4 because Marquise Brown is nowhere near the level of the receivers that we have in the top 3. Mark Ingram is also not at the elite level he would have to be to put this trio in the top 3. Don't get me wrong, he's a great running back. I don't think he's top 10 though. And so I think, the lack of, elite play from those 2 players hurts this trio quite a bit. I also don't think that Lamar Jackson will be able to replicate the production he had last season. I think, the reason why he had such a great season was because he took the league by storm and he was very surprising. Defenses didn't really know what to expect from him. I think that over time, especially next season, defenses are going to, have studied a lot more of him, especially this offseason. And, they'll have a better chance of stopping him.
I agree with your point, Emilian, about how this trio probably shouldn't be any higher on this list, pretty much based on the talent that's like the other 3 that we'll talk about later. I mean, this is by far not a bad trio at all. I mean, we have Lamar Jackson throwing to one of the fastest receivers in Hollywood Brown. I think they could, over time, develop some chemistry as Deshaun Watson and Will Fuller do, kind of similar to how they do it in Houston. I think that in a few years' time, this trio will be Lamar Jackson, J.K. Dobbins, Marquise, fastest trios around. But for now, Mark Ingram's not too shabby. He had 15 touchdowns from 1,265 yards from scrimmage. And, they do have a really good trio out there in Baltimore.
I have a question for you guys. Do you reckon Lamar needs to use his receivers as much as the other quarterbacks do in the league for them to win the division again in 2020? Or do you think they don't need to change their game style at all and keep on playing, the way they used to, the way they do in 2019?
Well, I mean, Lamar Jackson's weakness as a quarterback is his, accuracy, and that's why the Ravens have catered their entire offensive scheme to fit Lamar's rushing ability. I don't think that, the receivers are the most important part of the Ravens offense. I think, the the tight ends they use, as well as Lamar Jackson. That's the most important part. So I don't think that, having an elite player at receiver is really a necessity for the Ravens.
I agree with that statement. I mean, when we went through our AFC North team, there was no surprise to me that we didn't have any wide receivers from Baltimore there, because historically, even before Lamar Jackson, they haven't had their playbook isn't designed to have like elite receivers. Like it's not necessary. They spend their money, establishing their run game, getting those good offensive linemen, and Marquise Brown is gonna be that guy in the future, I reckon.
But Arif, what about someone like Steve Smith Sr.? I thought he's a pretty elite receiver they had in Baltimore.
That's true, but I reckon he was a good receiver. Yeah, that's right. But like elite receiver. But we look at other teams that have like two elite receivers almost. Like
that's a real point. But I really feel like Hollywood Brown is really a special talent, and I think he can really blossom into an elite wide receiver. And I feel like he can even make that jump as soon as next season. But obviously, back to your question, Anthony, obviously that offense in Baltimore is really tight end heavy, and there's less onus on wide receivers as there are on, the running back, quarterback designed runs, and those tight end focused plays. On to number 3 now. And we have Aaron Rodgers, Aaron Jones, and Devontae Adams from the Packers. And I really think this Packers trio should be above the Saints trio. The chemistry between Rodgers and Adams alone is a massive reason why this trio should be ranked higher. I really think Rodgers and Adams arguably have the best chemistry in the league between a quarterback and a wide receiver. You think we've talked about in previous episodes the lack of talent in that receiving core in Green Bay, apart from Devontae Adams, and how the Packers have neglected to look to the draft to surround Rodgers with other receiving talent. And it's just strengthened the bond between Rodgers and Adams, because they've really only got each other there in Green Bay. And I really think that chemistry alone makes this trio really special. And adding to the fact that Aaron Jones really blossomed last year. He's a touchdown machine, and he's only going to get better. So this trio, I really think, belongs at number 2 on this list.
Yeah, I agree with your point there, Jack, that, the chemistry between Rodgers and Adams is arguably one of the best in the league. For me, this trio, you've got elite players at each of the 3 positions. Therefore, it's easily one of the best in the league. Aaron Rodgers is also a top 5 quarterback, much like Devontae Adams is, one of the best receivers in the league. Aaron Jones, he had a monster 2019 season, and he's shown, as you said, Jack, that he's constantly improving. So this trio is incredibly strong. I just don't think it's as good as the Saints. I'll explain why a bit later. But I think, the best part about this is that no one in this group of players holds the rest back. And, it's going to be great to see these guys play together for many years to come.
I don't see why this trio can't continue for quite a while. There is a bit of question marks, I guess, around why the Packers, didn't select another receiver and why they selected a quarterback instead early and another running back. And that's a bit interesting because, definitely has the potential to be that lead guy as he showed in 2019. Beforehand, he was sharing snaps with Jamal Williams. And now that he really took over the running game, he got those 16 rushing touchdowns, tied for first in the league. And then Rodgers has shown absolutely no signs of slowing down. And Adams is, a one-on-one nightmare in my opinion. He's one of the most established route runners in the league. I agree with you, Emilian, that the Packers are where they should be, and I don't think they're as good as the Saints, and I think we're going to get into that a bit later.
Yeah, I agree that. I reckon third is the right spot for them. The Saints probably have better players, more skilled players, in my opinion. I think if you look at all these players in this trio, I reckon consistency is the key for them. Aaron Rodgers, he's done so much of his career. He hasn't showed signs of slowing down, and I mean, I'd assume he still have the same level of production in 2020. As for Devontae Adams, is obviously, Aaron Rodgers' number one target, and considering they didn't draft a wide receiver, in the draft this year, you'd assume he'd still get the same level of production from, playing behind Aaron Rodgers. Also, Aaron Jones, I think if there was a single factor that I'd put down for the Packers, making such a deep run to the playoffs, considering they didn't have, you mentioned before in other podcasts, they're being one of the more luckier 13-3 teams, in recent history. I think it'd be down to that run game and Aaron Jones stepping up from, in his third season, having his first 1,000 yards rushing season. I reckon that's probably the reason why they got to that mark. I think overall third is probably the right spot for them.
Just before we move on to the Saints at number 2, I just want to mention that when we think about these trios of quarterbacks, running backs, and wide receivers, a lot of it is based on chemistry. And I really feel like this trio has one of the strongest bonds in this league. I think the only other contenders are really the Seahawks and the Chiefs in terms of the chemistry these three players have with each other. And so I just really feel like this trio should be at number 2, but we shall move on to number 2. And we have the Saints with Drew Brees, Alvin Kamara, and Michael Thomas. And obviously, while I think this trio is second best to the Packers, this Saints trio is a force to be reckoned with, no doubt about it. While Brees is steadily declining, he still has a great chemistry with Michael Thomas, who, really just catches everything. I'm also predicting a bit of a bounce-back season for Alvin Kamara this year after a pretty subpar season by his early lofty standards, Emilian.
Yeah, you talked about, chemistry with these trios, and I don't see why you wouldn't include the Saints on this list. Both Alvin Kamara and Michael Thomas have played, the entirety of their careers with Drew Brees, as their quarterback. And they've really blossomed into, some of the best players at their respective positions. Drew Brees is declining, but I wouldn't say, it's that big of a deal. I think, his arm strength is definitely suffering. But, when you've got Michael Thomas and Alvin Kamara as, your main targets, I'd say, you don't really need, to throw the ball deep. Many times, Michael Thomas, we know that he definitely benefits, from short slant routes. But, if it works, why would you want to change that up? He led the league in receiving yards last year, 1,700. Quite incredible. So, honestly, I think this is the best trio in the league just because, these three players are nearly at the top of their game at their respective positions. And, it's just so hard to form, a trio this strong and this consistent.
If I could there, I'd just have to rebut your point there, Emilian, because obviously Drew Brees and Michael Thomas have a great amount of chemistry with each other. I think their bond has more to do with Michael Thomas's ability to just really catch any ball that comes within his catch radius. Obviously they do have chemistry, but the other factor is I think Rodgers and Adams have more chemistry than Drew Brees and Michael Thomas. And based on last season and going forward, I'd almost take Aaron Jones ahead of Alvin Kamara. If you compare their stats from last season, Aaron Jones literally had almost 300 more yards on the ground and had almost just as many receiving yards as Alvin Kamara. Not to mention Jones completely beat him in the touchdown category. I really like Jones's prospects going forward. And so I feel like Jones is kind of what tips it in the Packers' favor.
Yeah, I agree with your point. Jones definitely did have the better 2019 season. There's no argument to that. I just think that, I'd like to see one more season of that caliber from him because Kamara, as we've seen, he's put up 3 consecutive seasons with over 1,000 yards from scrimmage, which is also an incredible feat. I'm sure he'll get back to his, rookie and sophomore standard next season.
In my opinion, this is the best trio in the NFC. I do, however, I do respect your opinion, of course, Jack, about how these should be based on chemistry. But when I see the way Drew Brees, he just seemed, I think that even though Michael Thomas does pretty much catch everything, there's got to be some sort of, above average chemistry going with them, so that they always seem to be on the same page. Michael Thomas always seems to be in the right area, and I think that's definitely for a reason. I think if Kamara can get back to his 2018 2018 form and prior to that. I mean, he wasn't even too shabby in 2019. I mean, he was top 5 in the most broken tackles in the league. Like, he's still got that ability. Obviously, Jones was first in the league. But like Emilian said, I want to see Jones produce that again before kind of jump on the Packers bandwagon, I guess, in terms of their trio. But, Thomas, he had undoubtedly had an incredible season. He had 149 receptions and averaged almost 108 receiving yards per game, which is incredible. I think Thomas won't be able to reach that 149 reception tally again due to Breeze steadily declining, as you mentioned, Jack. But it was one hell of a season, and I think they are deservedly in second position on our list.
I agree with that part about Michael Thomas. Arif, I don't think he'll get back to that feat, but obviously it was an incredibly impressive feat. The only other question mark I have with the Saints is that Drew Brees did show signs of steady decline last season, and I believe that that decline will continue at a steady pace throughout this season and probably next season as well, which is another reason why I'm less confident in this trio compared to the Packers trio. Now, we move on to number 1 on our list of quarterback, running back, wide receiver trios in the NFL. And we have Patrick Mahomes, Damian Williams, and Tyreek Hill from the... And having the best player in the NFL already makes this trio a top 3 or top 5 trio, as simple as that. Adding the fact that you've also got Tyreek Hill there, and the chemistry he and Mahomes have, I mean, this trio is easily the best in the NFL. I was just talking about, in terms of chemistry, just chemistry alone, my top 3 trios would be, the Packers, Chiefs, and Seahawks. Well, you have the best player in the NFL and probably the most diminutive wide receiver in the NFL, and just as a duo there, it's just incredible. Like, it's an incredible trio, and then you add Damian Williams. Literally, any running back, like any half decent running back, would be just a cherry on top of this trio. Like, obviously, we're going to talk about Clyde Edwards-Helaire and how he could eventually overtake Williams. I mean, whether you have Clyde there or Damien there, I mean, it's just a cherry on top of just an amazing trio. Emilian?
Yeah, I do agree with you on the point there. With Mahomes to Hill, it's definitely one of the best, quarterback to receiver duos in the league, without a doubt. Mahomes is at the top of his game at quarterback. He's the best in the league without a doubt. Tyreek Hill, I'd say, is almost there, not quite. I do think that this trio should be a couple of spots lower, simply because Damian Williams does hold it back. He is a good running back. I just don't think he's top 10, arguably not top 15. I do think he holds it back compared to, the balance you have there with the Packers and the Saints having great players at each position. As you said before, Clyde Edwards-Helaire coming in, he's the Chiefs' first-round draft pick, so I think they'd be crazy not to use him because of his unique, skill set for his size. So there is the uncertainty there with Damian Williams, regarding how much of the ball he's going to see this season. Undoubtedly a great trio. I just think it should be a couple of spots lower.
I think this trio is definitely deserving of being number 1 on our list. I just think that connection between Mahomes and Tyreek Hill is just too good to overlook. Like you said, Jack, you mentioned that having a half-decent running back within this trio would just be the cherry on top, and I completely agree. I just think the real eye candy in this trio is definitely, the quarterback to wide receiver. I think the fact alone that Tyreek Hill is the fastest player in the league, along with Mahomes' skill, throwing the ball as a quarterback, is just too hard to overlook. As for Damian Williams, really showed up during the playoffs. I think that ability to come through in the clutch times, when it matters at the end of the season, I think that alone, it gives enough merit for him to say that he is at least a half-decent running back. I think he's proven already, but I just think that fact additionally proves that he is, running back that is really set that system.
Yeah, Anthony, there's a reason why they call him Playoff Damien. 6 of his 13 touchdowns were in his 3 playoff games, including 2 in the Super Bowl. We all thought LaShawn McCoy would have been the guy for them at running back at the start of the season, but he really flourished towards the end. Even with Clyde Edwards-Helaire coming in, I still think there's a place for Damian Williams on this team. Just in the Mahomes era, they've used a variety of running backs. I still think there's a place for him. And although I do agree with Emilian that I think the Chiefs possibly could be a few places lower, I don't think you can really go wrong with a Super Bowl winning trio here.
I agree, Arif. I think there is a place for Damian Williams in that backfield. I also agree with the fact that Edwards-Helaire definitely has to get some snaps in his rookie year. He's that too good of a talent. I feel like the Chiefs could go with like a running back by committee kind of setup. But I also agree with your point a lot, Anthony, about the Mahomes-Hill connection and how any running back that is half decent would just be a cherry on top. Well, that wraps up our top 15 quarterback, running back, wide receiver trios in the NFL. We hope you enjoy listening to us talk about them. You can find all of our content that we post and talk about on the podcast on our Instagram page. It is at touch.down.under. We're also on Twitter at the TDU podcast, and we premiere our podcasts on Facebook and YouTube at TouchDownUnder. Thanks for listening, and we will see you next week.